I remember that morning like it was yesterday, though almost 20 years have passed. The scent of cinnamon oatmeal still lingering in the kitchen, Dad rushing to finish his coffee before heading to work, and me standing in front of the bathroom mirror, admiring my freshly washed hair as it formed a beautiful cloud around my face. It was the first day I decided to wear my natural hair to Westridge Academy, my new school. "Maya, you look beautiful," Dad said, popping his head into the bathroom. His smile was genuine, proud even. "Your mother would have loved to see you, embracing your natural hair." I beamed at him through the mirror. Mom had passed away when I was 7, but I remembered how she'd sit me between her legs on Sunday evenings, carefully detangling my curls while telling me stories about strong black women throughout history. "Our hair is our crown," she'd say. "Never let anyone make you feel ashamed of it." At 13, I was finally ready to honor her words, after years of painful straightening treatments that left my scalp burning and my spirit diminished. I'd spent the summer letting my natural texture grow out. The transition hadn't been easy. There were awkward stages where I wanted to give up, but Dad had been my rock, encouraging me every step of the way. "You sure about this?" he asked, his eyes meeting mine in the reflection. "You know how some schools can be." I nodded confidently. "I'm sure, Dad. Besides, it's 2010. Nobody cares about natural hair anymore." How wrong I was. The first sign of trouble came during homeroom. Ms. Winters, a thin white woman with pin-straight blonde hair pulled into a severe bun, paused mid-attendance when she saw me. Her lips pursed into a tight line as her eyes fixated on my hair. "Maya." "Jenkins," she called. Her voice clipped. "Please see me after class." My stomach knotted as whispers rippled through the classroom. I'd spent the past year at Westridge keeping my head down, trying to blend in as one of the few black students in this prestigious private school. Dad had worked extra shifts at the hospital to afford the tuition, believing it would give me better opportunities. When the bell rang, I approached Ms. Winter's desk with my shoulders back, channeling the confidence Mom would have wanted me to show. "Maya," she began, shuffling papers without looking up. "Your hair is distracting. It's taking up space and blocking other students' view of the board." I touched my hair self-consciously. It wasn't even that big. "I'm sorry, Ms. Winters. I can sit in the back row if that helps." She finally looked up, her expression stern. "That's not the issue. Your hair doesn't conform to our grooming standards. Please review the handbook and make the appropriate adjustments for tomorrow." I felt my face grow hot. "But there's nothing in the handbook about natural hair." Section 4, paragraph 2 clearly states that all students must maintain a neat, professional appearance. Your current hairstyle is neither. Her tone left no room for discussion. "That will be all." I walked out of the classroom in a daze. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly before me, the chatter of students fading into white noise. Had this really just happened? In 2010? By lunchtime, I'd convinced myself that Ms. Winters was just being her usual strict self. She nitpicked everyone about something, right? But when I sat down at my usual table with Layla and Zoe, their uncomfortable expressions told me something was wrong. "What?" I asked, unwrapping my sandwich. Layla, my closest friend since I'd transferred to Westridge, leaned forward. "Principal Hamilton's assistant was looking for you. Something about a dress code violation." "Because of my hair?" The words came out louder than I intended, drawing stares from nearby tables. Zoe, always the pragmatic one, shrugged. "Just go see what they want. It's probably nothing." But we all knew it wasn't nothing. Principal Hamilton's office smelled of lemon polish and intimation. She sat behind her massive mahogany desk, reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed what I assumed was my file. At 40-something, with shoulder-length brown hair and perpetually pursed lips, she embodied authority. "Have a seat, Miss Jenkins," she said without looking up. I sank into the leather chair across from her, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to keep them from shaking. "It's been brought to my attention that you've chosen to alter your appearance." She finally looked at me, her gaze lingering on my hair. "While Westridge Academy respects diversity, we also maintain certain standards. Your hair, in its current state, does not meet those standards." The blood rushed to my ears. "I don't understand. This is just my natural hair." She slid the student handbook across the desk, a page already marked with a yellow sticky note. "Section 4, Paragraph 2. All students must maintain a neat, professional appearance. Additionally, Paragraph 5 states that hairstyles must not be distracting or extreme." I stared at the page, then back at her. "But there's nothing extreme about my hair. This is how it grows out of my head." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Maya, you're a bright student with a promising future. Don't let something as trivial as hair impact your academic journey. You have two options. Either tie it back severely so it doesn't expand, or consider a more appropriate cut. But those are your options." She closed my file with finality. "I expect to see the issue resolved by tomorrow morning. You're dismissed." I walked out of her office in a fog of disbelief and humiliation. The rest of the day passed in a blur, teachers' voices reduced to distant murmurs, classmates' curious glances burning into my skin. I kept touching my hair. This crown I'd been so proud of just hours earlier, now transformed into something shameful. When the final bell rang, I practically ran to the bathroom, locking myself in a stall as tears streamed down my face. I'd been naive to think I could just be myself here. Westridge had accepted me as long as I conformed, as long as I wasn't too black, too different, too me. "Maya, you in here?" Layla's voice echoed against the tile walls. I wiped my tears hastily. "Yeah." "Come on, girl. Talk to me." Reluctantly, I opened the stall door. Layla's expression softened when she saw my tear-stained face. "They told me my hair is unprofessional and extreme," I said, fresh tears threatening to fall. "They want me to tie it back or cut it." Layla, whose straight black hair hung like a curtain down her back, looked genuinely bewildered. "That's messed up. Have you told your dad?" I shook my head. Dad would be devastated. He'd worked so hard to get me into this school, taking extra night shifts and weekend calls. How could I tell him that the same institution he sacrificed for was telling his daughter her natural appearance wasn't good enough? "You have to tell him," Layla insisted. "This isn't right, Maya." But as I walked home that afternoon, autumn leaves crunching beneath my feet, I couldn't bring myself to make that decision. Part of me wanted to just give in, to pull my hair back into the tightest bun possible, to make myself small and acceptable. Wasn't that easier than fighting a system much bigger than me? I remembered the burn of relaxers on my scalp, the hours spent trying to make my hair something it wasn't. I'd finally found freedom in my natural curls, a connection to my mother, to my heritage. How could I surrender that? Our apartment was quiet when I arrived home. Dad wouldn't be back from his shift at the hospital until dinner time. I dropped my backpack by the door and headed straight to my room, where I stood before the full-length mirror, really looking at myself. My reflection stared back, a 13-year-old girl with warm brown skin, wide-set eyes like her mother's, and a cloud of dark curls that framed her face like a halo. What about this was unprofessional? What about this was extreme? I opened my dresser drawer and pulled out the photo I kept there. Mom holding 3-year-old me on her lap, both of us smiling wide, our similar curls catching the sunlight. "Our hair is our crown," she'd said. And now they wanted me to remove mine. When Dad came home, I was sitting at the kitchen table, the student handbook open before me. One look at my face, and he knew something was wrong. "Maya?" He set down his keys, concern etching lines around his eyes. "What happened?" The whole story came tumbling out between sobs, Ms. Winter's comments, Principal Hamilton's ultimatum, the humiliation of being singled out for something as fundamental as the texture of my hair. Dad listened, his expression darkening with each word. When I finished, he sat very still, his hands folded on the table. I couldn't read his expression, and for a moment, I feared he might tell me to just comply, to not make waves. "Do you want to straighten your hair again?" he finally asked, his voice gentle. I shook my head. "No, I like it this way. It makes me feel like me, like Mom." He nodded slowly. "Then you shouldn't have to." Hope flickered within me. "But what can we do? It's their rules." "Some rules," Dad said, reaching for his phone, "deserve to be challenged." That night, I listened from my bedroom as Dad made call after call. First to the school, asking for a meeting with Principal Hamilton, then to several other numbers I didn't recognize. His voice remained calm but firm as he explained the situation. Only when he reached someone named Teresa at the Education Equity Alliance did I hear real hope enter his tone. "Yes, that's exactly the issue," he was saying. "No, there's nothing specifically prohibiting natural hairstyles, just vague language about extreme and unprofessional appearances. Yes, she's one of very few black students. I understand. Tomorrow morning? That would be perfect. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you so much." The next morning, Dad made my favorite breakfast, French toast with cinnamon, and sat across from me as I picked at it nervously. "Maya," he said, waiting until I looked up, "I want you to go to school today with your head held high. Wear your hair exactly as it is." "But Principal Hamilton said—" "Let me worry about Principal Hamilton." His smile held a confidence I wished I felt. "Just promise me one thing. No matter what happens today, remember that there is nothing wrong with you or your hair. The problem lies with those who can't see its beauty." He dropped me off at school with a reassuring squeeze of my hand. "I'm picking you up after last period. We'll get through this together." The stares began the moment I walked through the front doors. Word had clearly spread about my defiance of Principal Hamilton's directive. Some students looked curious, others sympathetic, a few disapproving. Layla found me at my locker, her eyes wide. "You didn't tie it back," she whispered. "They're going to flip." "Let them," I said with more confidence than I felt. "My dad says there's nothing wrong with my hair." I made it through first and second period without incident. Teachers glanced at my hair but said nothing. Maybe, I thought, hopefully, the whole thing would blow over. Then came the announcement over the PA system. "Maya Jenkins, please report to the principal's office immediately." The walk to the office felt like the longest of my life. Every step echoed in the empty hallway, my heart pounding in rhythm. But something strange happened as I approached. I heard voices, loud voices, from inside Principal Hamilton's office. Mrs. Garcia, the front desk secretary, looked up nervously when I entered. "Oh, Maya, you can have a seat. Principal Hamilton is in a meeting. I sat in one of the stiff chairs, straining to make out the words being exchanged behind the closed door. One voice was definitely Principal Hamilton's, but the other, authoritative and unwavering, was unfamiliar. This policy, as written and enforced, constitutes discrimination, the unknown voice was saying. The vague terminology of extreme and unprofessional has been applied in a way that specifically targets this student's racial characteristics. That is absolutely not the case, Principal Hamilton responded, her tone defensive. We have standards that apply to all students equally. Equal application of a rule that disproportionately affects one group is still discriminatory, the other voice countered. And I should inform you that as of last year, the state has recognizing hair texture and protective hairstyles as racial characteristics protected from discrimination. There was a long pause before Principal Hamilton spoke again, her voice noticeably subdued. I wasn't aware of this legislation. Ignorance of the law doesn't exempt you from following it. Another pause, longer this time. What exactly are you suggesting, Ms. Ramirez? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm informing you that the Education Equity Alliance is prepared to file a formal complaint with the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights if this issue isn't resolved immediately. Additionally, given the current social climate, I imagine the local media would be quite interested in this story. My mouth fell open. Dad had actually contacted a civil rights organization about my hair? The door suddenly swung open, and Principal Hamilton emerged, her face ashen. Behind her stood a striking Latina woman in a crisp suit, briefcase in hand. This must be the Teresa my father had spoken with. Maya, Principal Hamilton said, her voice strained. Please come in. I entered the office cautiously. The atmosphere was thick with tension. This is Ms. Ramirez from the Education Equity Alliance, Principal Hamilton said. Ms. Ramirez extended her hand to me with a warm smile. It's nice to meet you, Maya. Your father has told me about your situation. We all sat down. Me in the same chair I'd occupied yesterday, Ms. Ramirez in the other visitor's chair, and Principal Hamilton behind her desk, looking considerably less authoritative than she had the 24 hours ago. Maya, Principal Hamilton began, clearing her throat. It seems there has been a misunderstanding regarding our grooming policy. After further review and consultation with Ms. Ramirez, I want to clarify that Westridge Academy celebrates diversity in all forms, including natural hairstyles. I glanced at Ms. Ramirez, who gave me a subtle nod of encouragement. So, my hair is fine as it is? I asked. Yes, Principal Hamilton confirmed, though the word seemed to pain her. Your hair is perfectly acceptable. There will be no need for you to alter it. Relief washed over me, followed quickly by a surge of anger. Why had it taken the threat of legal action for them to see something so simple? Why couldn't they have just respected me from the beginning? Ms. Ramirez must have sensed my thoughts. Principal Hamilton and I have also discussed the need for a review of all school policies to ensure they're inclusive and equitable. Haven't we? Principal Hamilton nodded stiffly. Yes, we'll be forming a diversity committee to examine our handbook and practices. In fact, Maya, we would welcome your input as a student representative. The invitation surprised me. Was this a genuine olive branch or just damage control? I'll think about it, I said carefully. Ms. Ramirez smiled. That's fair. Now I believe you should return to class, and Principal Hamilton will make an announcement clarifying that natural hairstyles are welcome at Westridge. As if on cue, the office phone rang. Principal Hamilton answered it, her expression changing from annoyed to concerned. "I see. Yes, I'll address it immediately." She hung up and looked at us. "It seems we have a situation in the main hallway." The three of us walked to the main entrance, and what I saw there stopped me in my tracks. Gathered in the hallway were dozens of students, many of whom I barely knew, and at least half were wearing their hair in natural styles. Black students who normally wore braids or straightened their hair had let it free. Even non-black, students with curly or textured hair had worn it natural in obvious solidarity. At the front of the group stood Layla, her normally straight hair now in its natural wavy state, and beside her was Zoe, whose Jewish curls sprang freely around her face. "What is the meaning of this?" Principal Hamilton demanded. Layla stepped forward. "We heard about what happened to Maya, and we think it's wrong. If her hair is extreme and unprofessional, then so is ours." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. I felt tears prickling behind my eyes. But these were different from yesterday's. These were tears of gratitude, of belonging. Ms. Ramirez leaned close to Principal Hamilton. "I believe this is your opportunity to demonstrate Westridge's commitment to inclusion." Principal Hamilton surveyed the crowd, clearly calculating her options. Finally, she straightened her posture and addressed the students. "Your solidarity is admirable. However, disrupting classes is not. Everyone should return to their classrooms immediately." She paused, then added, "There will be an announcement shortly addressing the grooming policy. No student will be penalized for wearing their natural hair texture." A cheer went up from the gathered students. As they began to disperse, many smiled at me or patted my shoulder supportively. Layla broke away from the crowd to hug me tightly. "How did this happen?" I whispered, gesturing to the students. She grinned. "I may have posted something in the school's online forum last night. I didn't expect this many people to care." But they had cared. In a school where I often felt invisible, people I barely knew had stood up for me. The realization was overwhelming. The rest of the day passed in a blur. True to her word, Principal Hamilton made an announcement, clarifying that natural hairstyles were acceptable under the school's grooming policy. Teachers who had previously given me sidelong glances now made a point of smiling warmly. Even Ms. Winters managed a tight nod when I entered her classroom. When final bell rang, I found Dad waiting in the pickup lane, just as he'd promised. One look at my face told him everything he needed to know. "Good day?" he asked as I climbed into the car. I couldn't contain my smile. The best. That evening, as we sat eating take-out Chinese food, Dad finally explained how he'd connected with the Education Equity Alliance. "I remembered reading about a similar case in another state," he said, twirling lo mein around his fork. "So I did some research and found that Teresa, Ms. Ramirez, had been involved. I called their hotline thinking I'd just get advice, but when she heard your story, she insisted on intervening personally. She was amazing," I said. "Principal Hamilton looked like she'd seen a ghost when Ms. Ramirez mentioned the media." Dad laughed. "Sometimes people need to understand there are consequences for their actions." I pushed my food around thoughtfully. "Do you think things will really change at school? Or are they just scared of getting sued?" "Probably a bit of both," Dad admitted. "Real change takes time. But what happened today? Your classmates standing with you. That suggests there's hope." He reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "I'm so proud of you, Maya. Your mother would be too." Later that night, I sat cross-legged on my bed, scrolling through my phone. Messages had been pouring in all evening, from classmates I knew well, and others I'd barely spoken to, all expressing support. Layla had sent a group photo someone had taken of the hair solidarity gathering, looking at all those faces, all that beautiful texture and curl and volume. I felt something I hadn't experienced at Westridge before. Pride. The incident at school wasn't the end of the story. In the weeks that followed, Principal Hamilton made good on her promise to form a diversity committee. Somewhat reluctantly, I agreed to join, along with Layla, Zoe, and a handful of other students, from various backgrounds. We met every Thursday afternoon to review school policies and suggest changes. It wasn't always easy. Some faculty members resisted, arguing that traditions shouldn't be abandoned for political correctness. But gradually, we made progress. The handbook was revised with clearer, more inclusive language. Cultural sensitivity training was introduced for all staff. A multicultural student union was formed, creating space for conversations that had long been avoided at Westridge. Ms. Winters remained cold toward me, but I no longer took it personally. Her disapproval had lost its power. The most surprising change came from Principal Hamilton herself. While initially defensive, she seemed genuinely committed to making Westridge more inclusive. During one committee meeting, she even shared that her own daughter had married a black man and was raising biracial children. "I want my grandchildren to attend a school where they're fully accepted," she said, "not just tolerated." The final triumph came near the end of the school year when Westridge hosted its first cultural celebration day. Students shared food, music, art, and stories from their diverse backgrounds. I brought my mom's famous sweet potato pie, made from her handwritten recipe that Dad had carefully preserved. As I watched students and teachers mingling, appreciating each other's cultures, I couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in those 7 months. One small act of resistance, my decision to wear my natural hair, had sparked a transformation. That evening, Dad and I walked around the celebration together, sampling foods and admiring displays. "You did this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You stood up for yourself, and look what happened." "We did this," I corrected him. "I couldn't have done it without you." He smiled, blinking back tears. "Your mother once told me that the most revolutionary thing we can do is simply be ourselves in a world that's trying to make us something else." I didn't fully understand what she meant until now. I looped my arm through his, leaning my head against his shoulder. "I wish she could see this." "She can," he said softly. "I'm sure of it." Years passed. I graduated from Westridge and went on to college, then law school, inspired in no small part by Ms. Ramirez. The hair incident, as I came to call it, faded into a formative memory, a moment when I learned the power of standing up for myself and the impact one voice could have. After law school, I joined a civil rights organization similar to the one that had helped me, representing clients facing discrimination. My natural hair became my signature, a visual reminder of where my passion for justice had begun. Life has a funny way of bringing things full circle. Last month, I was assigned a case involving a small business accused of unfair hiring practices. When I arrived for the initial meeting with the business owner, I was shocked to find myself face to face with none other than Ms. Winters, my former homeroom teacher. She didn't recognize me at first. Why would she? The shy 13-year-old with the unprofessional hair had grown into a confident 33-year-old attorney. But as I introduced myself, recognition dawned in her eyes. "Maya Jenkins," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "From Westridge Academy." I nodded, maintaining my professional composure despite the thundering of my heart. "It's been a long time, Ms. Winters." She looked older, smaller somehow. The severity I remembered softened by time and perhaps hardship. Her business, a small bookstore, was struggling, and now this discrimination complaint threatened its survival. As she explained her side of the story, I found myself listening with unexpected empathy. She had declined to hire a young woman because of her unprofessional appearance, language that painfully echoed my own experience. But unlike Principal Hamilton, who had had institutional power and resources, Ms. Winters was alone, uninformed, and clearly frightened. "I didn't realize," she kept saying. "I didn't know it was discriminatory." I could have recused myself from the case, citing our history. Part of me wanted to, but as I looked at her, this woman who had once wielded such power over me, now, vulnerable and seeking help, I saw an opportunity for a different kind of justice. "Ms. Winters," I said carefully, "what happened was discriminatory, whether you intended it that way or not. But I believe this can be resolved without going to court." Relief flooded her face. "How?" "Education," I said simply. "You'll need to implement anti-discrimination training for yourself and any employees. You'll need to revise your hiring practices and make a formal apology to the complainant. And you'll need to offer her the position if she's still interested." "That's all?" She seemed surprised by the relatively straightforward solution. Sometimes the most powerful remedy isn't punishment, but understanding, I told her. 20 years ago, I was sent to the principal's office because my natural hair was deemed unprofessional. That experience shaped my entire career. Her eyes widened as the connection fully registered. "That was you? The hair policy case?" I nodded. "That was me." She was quiet for a long moment. "I remember that day. Many of us teachers were uncomfortable with how it was handled, but we didn't speak up." She looked down at her hands. "I didn't speak up." There was something remarkably human in her admission. Not quite an apology, but an acknowledgement. And sometimes, that's enough. "Well," I said, gathering my notes, "now you have a chance to do better." Ms. Winters kept her word. She implemented all the changes we recommended and even went further, hosting a series of diverse author readings at her bookstore. The complainant accepted the position, and from what I hear has become a valued employee. Last week I received a package at my office. Inside was a first edition of Zora Neale Hurston's "Their Eyes Were Watching God," a book my mother had loved and read to me as a child. The note enclosed read simply, "Thank you for teaching me what my classroom never could. L. Winters." Sometimes justice comes in unexpected forms. Sometimes the most powerful response to harm isn't retribution, but transformation. And sometimes the girl who was once told her hair was unacceptable grows up to change the very systems that tried to diminish her. My hair is still my crown, just as Mom said it would be. But now I understand it's also my history, my resilience, and in ways I never anticipated, my power. If you've ever faced judgment for simply being who you are, I hope my story reminds you that change is possible. Sometimes with a single phone call, a moment of courage, or the simple act of showing up as your authentic self. And if you know someone struggling to find that courage, share this story with them. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in our battles makes all the difference. What would you have done in my position? Would you have stood your ground or tried to blend in? I'd love to hear your experiences with standing up for your identity, whether it went well or still feels unresolved. After all, our stories gain power when we share them.